Greetings, I'm Charles. I'm 55 years old. I'm 6'1" when I'm fully assembled, and I'm about 230 pounds. I'm going to address something today that I am surprised I haven't gotten to at this point. I've put up quite a few videos. If you've seen any or very many of them, you realize for the most part I do how-to videos. Basically, how do I manage something? How do I manage, learn to stand up on two prosthetic legs, how to get upstairs without any prosthetic legs on, just things of that nature. But one of the basics of being an amputee, and my channel is Amputee Basics after all, is being aware of infections. And it's a pretty complicated story, of course, so I did make myself a couple of notes here. But as an amputee, you need to be concerned with infections in several different ways. If you know you're going to have an amputation coming up, then of course the doctors preparing for that are going to be concerned about infections before the procedure is done. And then as the procedure is being done and through the healing process, and then beyond the healing process, there's also concerns for infections. And the reasons are, of course, for this. Actually, when an amputation, a surgical amputation is being done, or I suppose any sort of amputation, there's going to be a huge open wound. And like in my case, I have an above-the-knee amputation on one side, below the knee on the other. And what has actually happened here is on my above-the-knee amputation, which is this here, what has been done is there was a cut along the bottom of my leg that was done, and of course all the way through the muscle and everything. And then on the top there was a big flap, basically where my shin would have been. If you just picture the shin, that whole piece of chunk of skin and muscle and everything was cut out. So there's a big flap there, and as pushed back a little bit, they sawed off that bone, they tapered it off so that it wouldn't be pokey, and then they took this big flap of skin that had used to been the skin over my shin, the skin and muscle over my shin, and folded that over and stapled it closed. So there appeared to be a huge wound from here around to here. These little pokey things on the outside here, they kind of look like little angles. I'm sure there's some kind of a technical name for them somewhere, but I have no idea what they are. I asked a whole bunch of people. The best I can get was dog ears. So I call them dog ears. In any case, so that's the corners on the side that is formed once that flap is pulled over. And it just looks like there's a scar basically from one dog ear all the way around the bottom, coming around to here, but the entire underneath of this flap was a wound. It was just one that I couldn't see. It was under the skin. And of course, after the amputation, there was procedures for keeping that clean, keeping it sanitized, keeping it wrapped, and keeping the dirt and the grime and the bugs, bacteria, and all of that off of it. And if I ever wanted to get out of the hospital, I was going to have to learn the procedures of how to keep that clean and infection-free once I was out of the hospital. One of the early things that I learned, the signs of infection that was pointed out, and anybody who's gone through this process, I'm sure had it hammered into them before they were ever let out of the hospital. But the signs of infection are basically if there's a redness, for no apparent reason, there's a redness in the area, there may be some swelling, there may be some tenderness or pain involved in that, but one of the good ways to be able to tell is if the area is warm to the touch, which is an indication oftentimes of infection. And of course, you've been given some instructions on what to do. Go to the hospital or emergency room, or call in. They'll give you a regimen of antibiotics or something of that nature. Now, right after the amputation surgeries have been done, these things have been hammered in, and it's really obvious, man, there's a big sore there, and I need to keep it clean. I don't want to get infection because the doctor said I might have to have another surgery, and they'd have to amputate even higher, which is something that you just see not happen, especially if you had an amputation that started out, you know, at the ankle. Then you don't want that to become later up below the knee amputation, or then even after that potentially an above the knee amputation, or you know, anything of that nature. So as time goes on and these things heal up and they're not so obvious that you know you need to be concerned about a potential infection. Infection is, a lot of people tend to kind of just forget about it and don't blow, you know, they just kind of blow it off. They don't think much about it anymore because, well, you know, I had that big open wound and I never got an infection, so chances are I won't get an infection. That is one of the things that you want to avoid of falling into the trap of. Because at some point along the line, you likely, especially if you're a lower limb amputee, you're going to be healed up, and at some point you'll either want to or be offered the opportunity to get prosthetic legs or prosthesis for your leg, whatever's been amputated, and which is a good thing because folks want to be more mobile, and it's dandy. But one of the things that comes with this is there's all varieties of prosthesis and the way they're held onto your body. That's typically called the suspension system, how they're actually held onto your body. But a lot of them are very similar to mine in that they have this aspect to them is as there's a liner. At least in the United States we call these liners. In different parts of the world they might be called something different. But it's basically this rubbery type compound that is the first thing that contacts the skin on the residual limb, whatever you have left of your limb. That's the liner. There's another thing here that's a cloth, elastic cloth thing. Above that, that's a spacer sock, and there's different ones of those to help fill in the gap between the prosthetic leg and the liner so that the leg fits better and more comfortably. So, what I'm going to be talking about right now is the liner. The liner is like a rubber type compound. I'm sure it's not technically rubber. It's some kind of you know, proprietary compound. But the point is this: is that this compound, whatever company it comes from, the chances are that it's going to be relatively warm. It's probably going to retain heat. The kind I have is designed to dissipate heat pretty well, but that doesn't mean that it's still not warmer than my bare leg would have been, you know. So I can sweat in this thing, and it's warm, and that makes for a wonderful bacteria petri dish. Gives a super good opportunity for infectious type bacteria to multiply and grow. And one of the things I have to be concerned with then, since I'm in that situation, is I have to be concerned with injuries, broken skin of any nature that's going to be underneath this liner, you know, all the way from the top here, that's, you know, past my my thigh all the way to the end of my residual limb. So some of the things I definitely need to do is I need to use a clean liner every day, use a good process to clean the liners, make sure that they are disinfected each day. Also want to rotate the liners so that they can dry out. You know, you don't want to put a wet liner on. It's good if you have a liner that you can clean every day. You wear one day and clean it that night or whatever, and then let it dry, but then wear liner number 2 the next day, and then go through the process of cleaning that, and then wear on day number 3 you wear liner 1. It gives it time to dry completely for the bacteria to die out, and it will be safer. The other thing is definitely want to clean the leg or the residual part of the limb, if it's arm or whatever. You want to make sure that that's cleaned really well. In addition, that will also help reduce itching underneath the liner, which can, quite frankly, make you crazy if you've ever experienced it. So, the simple way to help reduce infections, because underneath this you can get small cuts, abrasions, bruises, maybe a pimple, an ingrown hair, a blister, just almost any kind of abnormality that can develop underneath this liner and break the skin, gives an entrance to bad bacteria and potential infection, and that is definitely what we want to avoid. So there is another fellow, his name's Chris Olive. He's from South Africa, so some of the stuff he calls them different things than what I call them here in the United States. But I'm going to put a little flasher thing up here, and he does product that he uses. He's a very active person, and he has a list of products that he uses to help reduce the possibility of infections. He's gone through a series of infections and through trial and error has come up with a couple of things that work. So I'll go on to the next thing here, cleaning the legs. If you got infections, as I said, they could lead to further amputation, they could lead to abscesses, they could just lead to tremendous swelling and potential further amputation. So these are definitely things you want to avoid. Unfortunately, to all of the pet lovers out there, is I know some of us love our dogs, and I know there's some people out there that love cats too. They are really not very conducive to helping prevent or healing of infections or being in situations where there's infections. Unfortunately, pets often get in the way, especially early on in a prosthetic situation, with potential, because they carry different kinds of germs than humans typically do, and they like to jump around and stuff too. So some to consider if you're about to get an amputation or just now got an amputation. You might want to see if mom or your brother or somebody can watch your animals for you while until you get healed up. Don't want to have any problems there. In any case, hopefully this information was useful for you. There's all kinds of information. A lot of it is ugly information on videos about people showing abscesses and draining infections and all kinds of junk like that. But there is some useful information out there about how to heal up some infections. Hopefully what I gave you will be useful for you, and it's something at least for you to consider and hopefully do some more research about. Maybe ask your doctor about it. Have a great day.